Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Today, we're actually going to be doing a video talking about how aspiring developers can become front-end developers. And I think it's going to be really neat. Together, we're going to try to come up with a plan on any self-taught developers, what you can learn, kind of what steps to take and what order of things to learn, and what resources possibly you could kind of pick up. But we're going to try to give you everything that we can to help you become that front-end developer. Because I know during COVID, times are tough, and it's kind of hard to afford a college degree. It's hard to afford a coding boot camp. And so we're going to do what we can to kind of give you that value. But today, we are going to start off with our intros just like normal. We'll start off left to right on my screen. John, you want to tell us about yourself a little bit?
Sure. Well, my name is John Snyder. I'm 35 years old, and I got some kids. I do front-end development for basically my full-time job. Last year it was kind of I kind of jumped ship a couple of times, but it's kind of always been this path of just being strictly a front-end developer / designer guy. But I pretty much grew up on that. I started with Visual Basic, and then I moved up from there. Visual Basic was fun. It was when AOL came out, and everybody had the modem, and long time ago. I don't even know if probably some of you probably don't even remember what a floppy is. But yeah, so that's where I'm at now. That pretty much sums me up.
Yeah, and John's been a friend of mine for a while. We actually, he live streamed coding on Twitch. Do you still live stream?
I try to. I'm actually, I'm on a different computer because the one that I use to set up all that stuff, I mean, it was like custom rigged for all that stuff to work. And I had like a server running on there, and it kind of crapped out. My tab key stopped working. And then it was my tilde key, and then the escape key. Oh, no. I'm just like looking at the direction, just thinking my monitor is going to go out. So yeah, that's kind of that's sitting over there. But when I get everything back up running, yeah, I try to as much as I can. It's really fun to do it. And I remember the community was so big. You remember Nick? Hardly Difficult.
Oh yeah. How's he?
Yeah, he seems to be doing pretty good for himself. I mean, I haven't seen him in a while, but I did see him stream like I don't know, maybe a month ago, maybe even more. But he popped up on there one night. It was kind of a blast from the past type of thing.
I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look out for him for sure.
Yeah, he was a cool guy for sure.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know about Nick, too. All right. Sorry, that was a bit of inside information. So I am Don. I was a software engineer for a few years. I think front-end software engineer, or UI engineer, software engineer, and then full stack engineer at 3 different companies. And then I finally got the opportunity to start my own company, which is something I've always wanted to do, helping aspiring developers. So that's what I've been doing since January, and it seems to be going well. And everyone that's commenting on all my videos, you're going to get me partnered with YouTube probably by end of January. So thank you very much for that. I'm really excited about that. That's it for me. I think it's worth talking about my path real quick. I self-studied about 1.5 years, and it was through Team Treehouse. Learned a lot of right stuff, a lot of wrong stuff. I definitely could go back and reorganize my time a little bit. But one thing that I did realize was I had a big gap in JavaScript, and JavaScript knowledge. I wish I would have known that. So what I did was I went to Full Stack Academy. It supplemented it. About 6 weeks later, I got my first front-end software engineer position. So that's kind of my path to becoming it. How about you, Evan?
Cool. So my name is Evan Vaughn. I'm a front-end engineer at a company called Better.com in New York. I started off with like coding like Zynga sites, if anybody remembers the blogging sites, like HTML, CSS. Went to college for art, thinking that it was the same thing. It wasn't. Switched my major to like a mix between like new media and like coding. And so my first job out of college was actually at an agency. And for the last, I'd say like 3 or 4 years, I've been bouncing around different startups, trying to get my fit within the startup world. And so I've landed at this company called Better. So that's a bit about my journey. But no, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Well, it's nice to meet you, Evan. All right. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah. So my name is Brandon Gorson. I'm in Chicago, and I have a little bit of a different trajectory. I finished up college, got my master's in counseling, so I was a therapist for about 5 or 6 years. Did a bunch of work with that, but then kind of got the itch to get into technology, and I've always kind of just monkeyed around with a variety of computer things, between like Raspberry Pis or just like customizing little things, but nothing ever really major. So then I did a little bit on my own, not very much, and jumped into a coding boot camp for 6 months and grinded really hard at that. And about, I'd say, like a month or so after finishing that up, maybe 2 months, got a job at a startup in Chicago, Catalytic, as a software engineer. And that's where I am currently, working on the front end team.
Very cool. Yeah. Brandon and I worked together, and it was definitely fun. You're one person I miss from Catalytic, so it's always good to touch base with you.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right, let's dive back into it. I want to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about kind of what it is, what it's like to be a front-end developer. What do you do day to day? And then I want to talk about how you got to that point. And you don't have to be super descriptive, because I think we talked about it a little bit in the intros. If you want to elaborate on anything, especially anything that you thought was really important and getting you there, that'd be helpful. And then we are going to make probably a semi-scuffed attempt to come up with a complete self-taught plan and guidance and advice for people that want to become front-end developers. So we'll see what we can come up with that. Yeah, let's dive into it. So Evan, I know you're kind of new. We feel free just to speak up. Brandon, I think you and I did a podcast. It was just me and you, but anyone has an answer, speak up. We're going to talk over each other a little bit. That's okay. But what was it like? What's it like being a front-end developer? Like, what's your day-to-day look like? Who wants to start?
I can get started. First of all, I'd say it's having switched career, be a career changer. I'd say that front end's been kind of the most fun and engaging career I've had. I'll see kind of what everybody else thinks, but I love the concreteness of it and the kind of working towards a goal. So in terms of day to day, usually I would say like a major way to split up my work is between either resolving bugs in the platform that we have, or integrating or improving or creating new kind of feature work for the platform. So between those 2 pipelines, kind of the goal is figuring out, what the problem is, or what's, not letting this thing work right now, if it's a bug, or what needs to be put in order for this feature to work. And then it's just kind of, for me at least, a lot of grinding away at that, either doing research, reading up on the docs, looking at libraries, looking up examples, talking to coworkers, kind of coming up with a plan, and then iterating over that plan until you have something that matches like a spec from a designer. And then you merge it in and click the "you're done" button and go to the next one.
I love it. It sounds pretty similar to when I was at Catalytic as well. Yeah. What portion of your day would you say is actually coding, and what portion is kind of digging in and figuring things out and researching?
So mine might be different from other folks. I'm curious to hear, but I'm very much like a doer. So I do spend a lot of time coding, but it's a lot of time coding things that aren't working and breaking. And I definitely would not say that it's the best way of doing it, but I do spend quite a bit of time grinding away at it. And I'm curious to kind of hear what other folks, if they do the same or if they do more research.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd say to that point, if a project isn't concretely defined, if I'm on my off time and we haven't kicked off a project, then I'm kind of digging into the details and figuring out things that I don't know, asking like coworkers, like, hey, what are some problems with the stack? Like, how does certain data get into like the components that I'm working on? And then, like, to your point, just breaking things, like figuring out how they work. Like for any like new job that I'm starting, like I'm mostly just breaking things to see how they work. And I've kind of like carried that over to each job. It's like, let me just break everything. And like, as I put things back together, that's how I get my domain knowledge. So like, no, I totally agree with that point.
Yeah, I would say I kind of do, my routine seems to have fallen into in the morning. You know, I wake up, I talk with the team real quick, I get my mind together from where I was yesterday. You know, I think about the notes that I had taken the day before, and then kind of during the afternoon, it's more of like the grinding and getting stuff done, breaking stuff, putting it back together, just getting, you know, just trying to, I guess, hustle, because you're doing a bunch of different stuff just to try and make it work, talking, communicating with people. And then usually, like, you know, you'll get your problem solved. And for me, it's like the end of the day, you know, I'll spend time with my family, but then I'll come back in here and you know, I'll spend time just thinking. It's really just kind of thinking of what happened during the day, what mistakes I made, what things that, you know, patterns that seem to be failing, things like that. And you know, mostly kind of experimenting, and then it's repeat.
Yeah, I can't remember the YouTuber's name. Joshua Fluke. Does everyone know who I'm talking about? Have you guys seen his videos? No? Okay.
I have not.
That's cool. So he had said something that really, I didn't even realize it till actually after I quit my last developer job to start my company. But he really kind of valued in, what do you say? He basically said that people don't really quit their jobs after 5. Developers don't really quit their jobs after 5. And it's actually, this has kind of become a problem because developers can't put it away, even when they visit family, even when they visit friends, or just like play the guitar, whatever you want to do. It's like we always find our mind, not everyone, but a lot of us find our mind kind of going back to the problem of the day that we're probably going to have to tackle the next day. And the problem is we always have problems. Like we have nothing but problems we have to solve every single day. And so that can become stressful. It can burn people out. So I'm actually curious what you guys think. How do you overcome that burnout? Because I saw you guys shaking your heads. Yeah. So when you keep thinking about these thoughts, like how do you not let that burn you out? How do you stay grounded and go at it with the full amount of energy the next day?
One thing I think is really interesting coming from like a therapist mental health background is that concepts like burnout, and I know this isn't the topic of this, but like imposter syndrome and things like that are things that are like constantly talked about in therapy. And I've like supervised other therapists to work through those issues. And one of the key things, at least when it comes to mental health, and I think it applies to being a developer as well, is to really look at this concept of like mindfulness. So being aware of kind of like where your mind's at. So it's not like absent-mindedly, like it sounds like, John, you have kind of like a strategy, right? Like you go into this office and you can think through things and process through it. That's kind of the idea behind mindfulness, is to actually do something with purpose. So when you're thinking through those problems, it's okay to do that. And in the same way, when you get thoughts of, you know, I should be doing this, or I need to be working on this, you know, being able to let those go and be like, yeah, you know, I'm thinking about work right now, but I really want to play guitar. So, you know, acknowledging those thoughts, letting them kind of wash over you, and then moving forwards. Because I think thinking about it all the time or coming back to it is like a recipe for disaster.
Would you, so I've heard this concept of, well, first of all, I do mindfulness meditation. I'm not consistent with it, but when I do it, it's really helpful. But I feel like I've learned to let my thoughts kind of just like, I acknowledge they're there, and I try to detach the emotion from it. And then I do whatever I need to do and just let them be there. It's a really like abstract idea, and it didn't make any sense to me. It didn't help me at first, but is that kind of like the strategy that you're talking about when those thoughts come in, and that's how you handle it?
Yeah, the metaphor I use a lot is like if like a wave is like washing over you, right? Like whatever the feeling is or whatever is like bugging you about work, especially sometimes people get hung up on, how things should have been, letting that kind of like wash over you like a wave would, and then it just kind of goes back out to the ocean and you kind of move on.
Okay. All right. This is definitely a tangent. I was just kind of curious about it. Do you, John, Evan, do both of you find that you're able to de-stress and not let work take over your life?
It was definitely a problem like earlier in my career. But as of late, to the mindfulness point, it's kind of like I'm aware that I'm thinking about problems outside of work. Like say like there's a problem or a bug that I wasn't able to fix during my like 9 to 5. I'll probably spend like maybe 30 minutes decompressing and like allow myself to think about it. And then after those 30 minutes, be like, I'm done. Like I'm walking away, like I'll disconnect. But yeah, I'd definitely say like that grind until like you've burned out is real. And so like you have to be aware of that and just kind of like give yourself that a lot of time of like, all right, I'm thinking about it and then I'm putting it away. Otherwise you'll never really be able to put it away and have those like mechanisms, because then like the job will just be 24/7 and you won't be useful to anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of learned, honestly, at the end of the day, and if you started like, programming stuff just because of just generally being interested in it, and you kind of had this, this world where, you're doing this stuff for absolute fun and there's like zero stress because you're not doing it for a company or for a client, you're just doing it. You kind of know what it feels like where you enjoy, the speed. You're not getting caught up on something because there's nothing to get caught up on. I mean, there's nothing to be upset about. You're going to spend a lot of time going, that's weird that it did that, but you're not going to be upset, because you don't have somebody that's going to be like upset with you. Yeah, exactly. But then I also realized, even like working at a job, if you have a job somewhere, that means that you've had experience doing it before, and they recognize that and they see that you're doing that. And when things get tough or when things get stressful or there's deadlines that have to be met, as long as you're doing what you're doing and doing the best that you can, you've got nothing to worry about. If you made a mistake, then you made a mistake, because everybody makes mistakes. If it's a mistake that you keep making over and over again, that's when they kind of like start looking into how you can figure that out. But that's really just reaching out to people. So I try and think of all that when I'm like doing my work, because at the end of the day, it's just a job. You're not, nobody's life is going to be lost because you couldn't center some text or something like that. It's, what I mean? It's no big deal. Just be open with it and just do the best that you can.
I do think there's a connection there with like the imposter syndrome and the pressure, because to me it's all, or like burnout, I guess, around like, I should be able to figure this out. What am I doing? And like, then it's like more stress on top of deadlines. So I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. That's interesting. This is definitely not a question I planned on asking, but I'm glad we talked about it, because it is a big problem in the developer industry, not just front-end developers, but back-end developers, full stack. And when I think back, deadlines are the only thing that stressed me out. I love coding. If it weren't for deadlines, my job wouldn't feel like a job.
Yeah, I mean, we all run into our little problems. How do I do this? But yeah, it's nothing really stress related. It's more of a reward at the end, like a race.
I agree. So what's your favorite thing about being a front-end developer?
Well, for me, I mean, I love everything visual. I've always been all about design. If I'll be honest in saying that I really wish that I spent time doing back-end stuff. But for the most part, I'm just obsessed with the whole kind of psychology of a human interface, which is what, this is what all we do is that. So just the idea of that alone is enough for me to just keep doing this all the time. I kind of decided I want to do this stuff when I was really, really young. I was messing with Flash and all that stuff, and I just stuck with it.
Oh, you too? Great. Awesome.
I love, yeah. Like, I think it was 95 or 96. I got into Flash before Adobe bought it. It was Macromedia.
Okay. It was Macromedia.
Macromedia, yeah. I remember it was like, and then there was Flash MX. And yeah, man, that was my start. That was the moment that I figured out, because I like doing design. That was the moment when there was like kind of coding involved with art. Animating stuff, but then having, being able to click on it and things like that, just giving your art a mind of its own. That concept alone was like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, is that. So
what about the psychology of the human interface did you like? Like, what's one aspect of it?
Well, I mean, as of late, and this is me just kind of diving into like just thinking about data visualization, okay? But the same rules apply where you have the UX laws, right? And just kind of how the mind works and how people are sort of to be able to go into whatever they're looking at and just kind of know how to use it and enjoy how it's responding back to them. And there's these kind of rules. I got big into Gestalt theory, which is a very interesting thing if you look at it, because it's like tricking the brain. Honestly, it's you ever those books where you have optical illusions. It's your mind. If you see a circle, well, I shouldn't say if you see a circle. If you see a line that's curved and it has these there's empty parts in it, your mind fills in the rest. So that kind of stuff it applies to when you make designs and things like that. And it's just a very interesting thing of why we do that and how our brain is, it tends to try and make sense of chaos, of randomness. So it groups things by, things that you can differentiate, color or size, and all that stuff is like Gestalt theory. And then it kind of made its way into the, laws of UX.
So yeah, the Gestalt, by the way, is
it is?
the sum
I've
of
been
the.
saying it wrong this
No,
whole
it's all
time.
right. Sum of the parts. Oh, you're right though. It's the
That's
concept
so
of
funny.
like the sum of the.
This is what happens when you learn stuff on the street.
Yeah, but it's the sum of the parts is like bigger than the whole. So it's that idea of like you can't just take little pieces of something and they're not all the same, but when they're all together. Yeah, it like can do so much. I had never thought of it with
I'm so glad
UI
you're on this
design.
call, and now I know
Yeah,
how to
man,
say
I
it
got
right.
you. I
Holy
got
cow.
you. But I've never thought about that with design, but that's a really good point. And I actually think that explains why I'm such a terrible designer, is because I'm so micro focused on like the button should look like this, but I don't look at the button in the page. That's really
it's
interesting.
Funny. If you look at your, when you code and your IDE, look at the Gestalt stuff, especially the laws of grouping, and then look at your IDE, and tell me that you won't see those rules being applied.
Yeah.
Or where you have your theme or whatever, and it's colorizing certain things, it's separating things. When you make an object, it's formatted. It's all works with all interfaces. So yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, that's different take on it, but it makes sense. Like the sum of the parts, because when I was working at an agency, it's kind of like we focus on each component and like how they made an experience like for a marketing page. But now that I'm like in product land and kind of like working on products, it's kind of like how do those like individual like pieces create like an entire experience. And so like it's interesting to see, or it's been interesting to see like the translation of like the design background that I've had with like proper design and UX and as far as coding, because now it's like I'm not just thinking about this one piece, I'm thinking about like the entire platform.
Wait, so are you saying you started thinking about the entire platform when you transitioned into coding?
When I transitioned into like products, so like when I was at an agency, it was just kind of like build the component, like ship the design system, and then kind of hand it off and go to the next one. But with like products, you own the domain pretty much, so like you have to give it more thought and more like care. And so like with those Gestalt principles, it's like how does your piece fit into like the entire like product, and like how does your piece influence the rest of it, and vice versa.
That's interesting. So with design and UX, you really didn't think about the whole product.
Not at agency, no. It's just kind of like a product came to us and we were like, okay, we'll just design it. At product, it's like we own it all pretty much. It's like having an in-house team. Gotcha.
Okay, so it was the type of product you were working on. It was moving into product work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's. I think that's one of the things, Brandon, that I love about Catalytic too, was the amount of ownership we got with the product. It was very different because, we really didn't have a traditional product owner role, and the developers, the front end developers mainly were, or people that would at least touch the front end, they were product owners in a sense. It was a really weird dynamic, something that it took a while to get used to. But I think that's what brought me enjoyment into Catalytic, was just like being able to own the product and like really like you just need to talk to the rest of the teams, but figure out like how it's actually affecting the users, and you can kind of look through the user feedback, and like it almost like forced you to want to know more about the user when you had that deep ownership of it. Okay, I can understand that. So I think, so we touched on, how to de-stress as a front-end developer. That was kind of just my bonus, because I think it's incredibly important. And a lot of people need to realize, because I have people that come to the meetup, my mentorship meetup, and even when they're dealing with a problem, like every time I hear like someone sigh, or like, you can just kind of hear people frustrated that they're working through a problem. Like my main concern isn't like getting them to work through the problem. It's getting them to enjoy working through the problem. And so it's a different problem to tackle, but it's important that you enjoy your work. And maybe kind of what you recommended, Brandon, maybe your strategy of mindfulness is understanding there's a deadline, but not letting it hold any emotional control over you, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, my scuffed way of putting it. Definitely not a therapist way, but yeah, I think that's really interesting about front end. But okay, so we all have our different reasons. I'm kind of curious. So Brandon, you went through a coding boot camp. I know that. John, did you go through a CS degree or coding boot camp at all?
No, I probably should have, but no.
Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I learned, I don't know if you've asked this question, but one of the main things that I've learned as far as my experience goes with getting to where I'm at is that there's something that I read not too long ago that fits this, but you read a lot faster than you think. And for me, it's like, I got good, and I found my style. I found my thing, that makes up how I code and stuff right now. But if I were to have gone back and I were to have like read stuff and listened to people and not try and spend all my time thinking all the time, I would have gotten to this point a long time ago. I probably would have been able to excel twice as fast as I could have. But I decided to try and just, do this without really like just thinking of, I want to do this, and then not trying to think on how to really do that, step by step. If I were to have read more, I think that's my main thing that I would want to change.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
You say read more. Do you mean like read more docs, or like read more articles, or read more like books?
I mean, I would say all the above. Just read.
Okay.
Just read what other people think, how other people approach certain problems. There's, as far as read docs, I don't know how many times I've tried all day long to try and figure out a problem that the core API has already, but I was just too lazy to really to read it. And so I'm trying to solve a problem that I don't need to, things like that.
Yeah, I think being afraid of the docs is something that was like critical to getting through, or maybe not even being afraid of them, but feeling like intimidated, like, oh, this is going to be too hard to understand, or this is too much. And being able to really embrace that and just read it and really understand it goes a really long way.
From the amount of documentation, that kind of fear, that kind of interests me, like the fear of documentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll speak for myself, but when I tackle like a new library, and if the docs seem like long, if there's no pictures, I'm like, oh, here we go. And I'm like already like zoning out. I'm like, where are the examples? Like where something's gotta be a code pen somewhere.
I'm really big on examples. I mean, I do say like read a lot, but the examples, if you have tons of examples for library, I mean, D3, I'll take D3 as an example, but you look at there, and it's like, it has a documentation. It's really, really well done. But there's so many demos that you can look and kind of see.
Yeah, I've been doing some like personal projects and learning things, but taking the time to actually like go through the docs and not just, I don't know, avoid them or think I can just hack something in there it's been really helpful to read them.
Yeah. I mean, if you play guitar and you just learn how to play other people's songs and not learn the actual theory of music and stuff like that, I mean, that's kind of the same thing. You'll just be really good at doing other people's songs.
Absolutely.
You won't be able to do your own stuff. Yeah.
And I think about that a lot with coding, because because I think there's also that fine line between like copy and pasting other people's like code examples to like get things to work, and coming up with it on your own and figuring out, what's the line there. Because when I was first learning, I really didn't want to copy anyone's code, which I think is like a good approach. Just looking at like peers of mine that would just rip, an entire project and have no idea what it's doing. So it's like that fine line between like understanding and using something, especially when you're first starting off, or just like ripping it just to accomplish an end goal. But yeah, at that point, you're not really learning anything. And it's just such a tight use case. It's really not, I don't find it that helpful.
I think that goes back to like the pressure of a deadline, because like with a deadline, you're more likely to just kind of rip something and not understand it. But if you have the time and space to give yourself and allow yourself to kind of learn, then at least in my experience, I'm looking at these examples like Stack Overflow or like Google. It's like, okay, this is how they've done it, but like, let me understand like why they got to this approach. Why is it optimal in the approach that they went? Like essentially like the theory of why, rather than like getting the exact why itself. So, I mean, it's to that fine line. It's like, it's when you're starting off and you're just kind of like trying to learn things, and like, I'm not going to say it's like cool to rip, but it's like, it's perfectly okay. But as you get more senior, then it's like, it's time to understand like why these things are working the way they are.
I think that makes a lot of sense. This is a really good topic. I do want to move on though, just because we only have so much time. I did want to ask you, Evan, did you go through a coding bootcamp or CS degree? CS-esque degree. So like the official title is like New Media Interactive Development. And it's basically a split between like design and like CS. So I didn't get like the basics of like algorithms and O notation and all that stuff. But like I got a core understanding enough to like land a job. And then from there, just kind of like a hustle and learn all the things that I can. Okay. All right, cool. So that definitely gives me some extra context. I actually feel bad for cutting you guys off because that was a really good topic, but we do. I'll probably talk to you guys after the podcast about that because I have my own opinions. Okay, but what I kind of want to do right now is, so I think everyone has context of how we became developers and what we enjoy about Frontend, right? I think that's important. So with that context, I would actually like to kind of come up with as much as we can, a step-by-step plan of what aspiring developers can do if they want to focus on becoming a front-end developer. So, for example, we could start out with like month one. Let's say someone, I think all of us at some point we kind of had a spark of interest in technology, and we discovered that you could code something out. You could have a thought about like some kind of solution that you want out there in the world. You could code it. You could actually build it, turn it into something tangible that people could use. And you realize that you could do it through writing code and producing something that people can use. So you might not have really even laid out any code whatsoever. No, you haven't even worked out with any sort of interface. But yeah, like most people that get into technology, they had a computer. They use technology in different formats. We have a phone, we have tablets, we have different pieces of technology. But at this point, when you realize like just becoming a coder, becoming a developer is a thing that you might have a passion. Well, you might not realize you have a passion for it, but you might have an interest for it. What are the next steps that you think someone like that should take to start diving into coding? Do we care about like trying to see if they are really interested in it? Do we care about like, just giving them kind of a sample course of what it's like to code and build something super simple? Like within that first month, what do you think aspiring technologists, aspiring developers should be doing to solidify that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe from it's so hard also like in the beginning because everybody, I feel like, is in such a weird place. Even just hearing about like the different places where everybody started at in this call. But I mean, I think if you have any interest in a front end, you got to start, and can be up for debate, but you got to start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you have to have a page built, even just a single page with some level of interaction, just to see if it's anything that you find interesting or exciting. And I also think, at the end of the day, that's where all this stuff really, at least the work that I do, is built out of. And you don't necessarily need to master it, but by the first month, at least getting just like a really simple page, even if it's like maybe GitHub page might be too much, but just something even on a local browser, I think VS Code lets you run that.
Like a code pen, yeah.
Yeah, even a code pen, would be great just to do it and just see what it's really all about.
Like taking that a step further, like some of these, I know CodePen has it like a gallery view of like all the things that people have done you can share. Like even diving into some of those, like before even touch like code, like diving into and then diving into some of those examples and like seeing how code is laid out. I think it's important to know like how each piece like is important, and then like further on understand how they all interact together. Just because like when we all started, like front end was just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like throw it up on a page, boom, you're done. Now like there are so many barriers of like, do you need to learn a build system, like React? It's like it's so obfuscated, like the core of it, that like one of my concerns in some of these boot camps, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, it's like they're teaching for like the job rather than the core concepts of things. So like I hear a lot of stuff like about React, but I'm not sure like people are learning about like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so like if you're self-starter, then like don't even worry about like React. Don't even touch that until like month 3 or 4. It's like get those core concepts down. Just at least as far as like HTML semantic markup, like CSS, maybe not so much like the advanced stuff like CSS grid and Flexbox, like in some of the like emerging kind of technologies, and then just like plain old JavaScript and just play around. Maybe make a page, maybe just like make a button, like make something that's visible, and like see if like that visceral reaction to like making something is what you're after.
Well, on that point of looking at other people's work, if you were to imagine that you're beginning, you're starting out, and you don't really know what's what at all. Going to something like something that you think looks really awesome, and then checking it out and seeing how interactive is it, and then looking at the tab that has all the code in there, and it'll be very scary looking to you because you don't know what it is. It's all hieroglyphics, but if what you're looking at to you seems worth it, if it seems worth it, then that would be like the first decision that you should make if you're going to go into this stuff. Because learning the boring stuff, it's going to be super boring, but if you keep thinking of what you saw before, of what this could actually do, and it's worth it to you, you'll go through it. You'll do it. Because it'll be worth it, right?
I really like this idea because how I got into it when I was, I think it was like 10, 11, 12, I clicked view source. and I discovered that you could edit people's pages, and I thought I was God. I could change everything and just save it, and I could make all the changes that I possibly could. And I actually went through view source, and I was just changing little pieces of code. It started with just like changing the text that I saw on the page. I actually looked through the entire block. I saw the text. I changed it. I save it. It changed. I'm like, wow, this guy's really going to love me. Whoever created this. And it didn't save. I discovered that later. But it was really cool to, feel that I could actually code something out and change something within technology and have it produce this entirely different thing right in front of me. And it, Evan, like you said, that's where I kind of got that visceral reaction. And I started to really think maybe I'm going to like something like this. I'm going to explore more of it. But I like the idea of just like getting something built, even if it's a button, even if it's like a little navigation or something within the first month, like try to build something little and see how you like it. Did you get anything? Any kind of reaction out of creating something and producing it right in front of your eyes or not,
I would also really, just not to backtrack too much onto our concept of like copying and pasting, but really starting pretty fresh from like a page would be really good, especially if you're starting off, and not falling into that like, oh, well, I just want to make a page, so this one looks good, and like grabbing it. You're not going to get that same feeling of like, I built this thing from scratch, or the work that's kind of tied into that. Because even just getting a page up with your name centered with a different color background is going to be a pretty good start. And if there's a button that changes the text, that's even better. But just to look up, how do I change a button in CSS or with JavaScript, you're going to solve that really quickly compared to if you really kind of think out what needs to happen.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe just using the concept of someone else's idea of what you possibly could build in the future, but that's not really what you should be aiming to build. Yeah, I haven't built a marquee in like 7 years. Do they still work? Maybe put that on the page.
Marquees? Yeah.
Marquees. Yeah.
Talking about that tag thing?
Yeah.
Yes, it totally works. It totally works.
Awesome.
It totally works. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's just news for other people out there.
I just tried that the other day too.
Did you?
I also tried the sub and the sup too. Remember those?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Sub and sup.
Is that like
when AOL
sub? Is that like misplacing the integer?
It's like they're making the text up.
Yeah,
smaller,
yeah.
low.
I
remember because in like the early days, you could send sups and stuff and whatever to people, and it would format it. Yeah. Yes, still there.
Making layouts with tables.
Oh.
Oh my god! Reminds me of Dreamweaver. Remember Dreamweaver?
Oh yeah, I used Dreamweaver to make a layout with a table. My first web hosting company. Yeah.
It still exists. I can download it right now. I just wonder who is working on this. I wonder if everybody there like working on it. Like, why are we still doing this? Who's using this?
That's good. You took motivation from, I'm sure, several developers. Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
Sorry.
No, it's funny. I agree.
I used it to format text colors and stuff, or no, it was to copy Word formatting so that I can steal the styling and stuff. I remember using it for that.
Okay. I like it. So I think within the first month, we just want to introduce the idea that you're going to have to learn some fundamentals, but you should apply them early as possible, because I can tell you, people that come into my meetup, a lot of them haven't even touched a page on their own. They've just gone through the tutorial. They haven't really built anything of their own. They haven't like tested their knowledge and, more than likely haven't reinforced it at this point. So I think it's important to put something on the page and just try it out, play around. I like that idea. So what about like within the first 3 months? Where do you think they should kind of be at?
Definitely think evolving from like a static site into something a little more dynamic, not necessarily like majorly dynamic, but just fetching some sort of information from an API and displaying it. Doesn't need to live update or anything like that, but starting to understand that data needs to be flowing into your website, or no one is going to be that interested in your website ultimately. So figuring out how to get data into it would be important. And I mean, to be honest, after 3 months, I'd still be hitting the HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
Oh yeah.
Hey, that's after 15
Like
years,
hard.
you're still going to do that. FYI. You'll
Yeah, I like
always
that.
be doing that.
Yeah. All of us, I'm sure, still are. So, okay, so the idea is you're still going to be learning, right? But you're thinking you need to bring some dynamic data in. And I think that is one of the easiest ways, because a lot of front-end developers, I think at some point, I always encourage developers to build a personal project, something that they'd like to push out to users, because I think it's helpful to get experience of getting user feedback. And even if it's just like your mom and dad, you built a website for them and them telling you, this is kind of actually how we were thinking about having it formatted, taking that feedback in, changing it. I mean, it's like a very minor version of an agile process. It's getting that user feedback in, iterating on your product, and pushing something out. But a lot of developers kind of question, even around the 3-month mark, like, should I start learning backend? And it's like, well, and then we kind of dive into, well, I think you should try it. You should see if you enjoy it. But if your focus is front end, I don't think a lot of front end developers need to, put up a node server. I don't think they need to set up a database. I don't think they need to set up an API. I think it's going to help them make them a little bit more marketable, especially if they're going into the startup world. But I don't think it's needed. And what you can do is bring that dynamic data in from someone else's API. So even just sending out that Ajax request, getting that information, I think it's super helpful. I think that's a really good source of dynamic data that you can get in. And maybe it's just like, what do you think would be like a good API to grab data from? Would it just be like maybe try to figure out their favorite website and grabbing data from that? Maybe it's just like bringing in tweets, bringing in their song playlist from Spotify, or
anything that's like to that point of like a personal project, like a to-do list, or like a top favorite artist of like 2020 or something that, like, to everybody's point, like, you grab data and can actually manipulate it within like the front end with, like, when I was going through school, like, back end was like necessary, but it wasn't something that like I was really excited about. Like, I had to learn it just because I had to learn it. It almost like deterred me from learning, like, or going to this field in the first place. Is like, I don't really want to do back end at this point. I know what I want to do. It's front end. So like, yeah, I think as long as we can grab data from someplace and just like have them majorly focused on the front end, and like maybe like further down the line when they land their first job and have to interact with like back end just to get some things done, like if that piques their interest, fine. But if the focus now is just to get front end, like let's get them as strong as the front end as possible before like they have to go out and search for jobs.
I'll only throw in this to start a conversation. I'll do a little slight disagreement, only in that I think that there's a huge benefit to getting a really basic, back end rigged up to really understand what sort of data you're grabbing. I don't know if that's by month 3, but I think, a lot of front end developers would benefit from at least getting some sort of database set up or some sort of backend or anything, even if it's very minor, just to actually understand what's happening. Because I think that's really valuable, just to understand where your data is coming from and how it gets there. I don't know. That's what I think.
So what makes it valuable?
I think understanding like errors that come up. Like I had to spin up like a API to do some like TV show analysis work that I'm just doing. It's kind of like a side project, but it involved like really digging into like how is this data like served up to me, and what's kind of like the importance of its shape and responses, and then how do I set those up? And I don't know, I think I just gained a much better understanding of where all of that's coming from. I guess also, I don't know, I look at it as like, I don't want to just know half of what's going on. I think it's important to kind of know what it all is. So that way I know, well, wait a minute, is this like my front end work that's, is it the client side that's broken, or is it more of like the server side that's not working? And I do think that's a little forward for like a new developer, but I definitely think that's something that you just can't shove in the black box and just say, well, it'll be there at some point. I do think some folks need or you would benefit from understanding what's going on and how it's getting to you.
I don't think there hasn't been a job that I've worked product side where I didn't need to understand the back end a little bit. But I think if you first have like the training wheels on, I don't think like going deep diving into like spinning up a DB is like necessarily like, I guess within the first 3 months, something to be like totally zeroed in on. But like further down the line, yeah.
I would also say, and even in terms of like accessing APIs and stuff like that, I would say if you're starting off, avoiding anything with like OAuth, authentication and things like that, which I think like Spotify and Twitter both have maybe.
Yep.
But those can be like, I don't know. I found those really challenging. I still find them challenging at times to get, resolve token issues. So if I'm starting off, I know that there's a website, I don't know, you can maybe comment it here, but there's like a GitHub repo that has like all of these open APIs that are like no authentication or like a really simple key that you can plug in. And I think if you're starting off, that's the sort of stuff you want to really target, that you're also interested in.
Okay. So do you feel like, I want to challenge that a bit. One, I mean, I'm in the realm of, I like doing both. I love doing both. I love figuring out how everything works. That's just the type of developer that I am. But I want to also be careful of like sending a front-end inspired developer into the black hole and see what he comes out with. If they're already intimidated by front-end, do you feel like you could serve up data through the API and not touch the database? Do they need to learn about how to interact with the database?
Yeah, maybe I think I misspoke on like the database aspect, but I think at least having a server, getting like a basic backend up, not so much the database. But because I think, I don't know, as like a developer, I guess I look at like, if you're going to make your own stuff, it's fun to be able to really like dig into it. And at some point you're going to hit a wall. And again, that's not in 3 months. That might not be in 6 months, 9 months, a year, but eventually you're going to hit a wall where you're going to want to have like your own stuff, or you're going to want to present stuff that is interesting to you. I guess it kind of depends on your goals as a developer. But eventually you'll need to at least, tap into something a little bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like it's... Go ahead.
Like maybe like a Node or Express server, like something that like touches what they're learning, but you don't have to like go into a black box with it. Like you can have the surface, get what you need from like the learnings of it, but still kind of stay within the realm of like the knowledge that we're going for, which is like JavaScript, HTML, CSS. So it's like best of both worlds without having to like shove them directly into like learn a backend.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for me, all these different languages and stuff, they all have their very interesting parts themselves, and when your goal is to, let's say, make money or get a job, right? That's where when the 3-month mark comes by, and if this is not fun and it's stressful for you, and it's stressful because you're just trying to do it so that you can get a job or something like that, it's not going to work out. Like you have to look at this stuff that it takes time. You have to have the time to learn it, but then you also have the time needed to be able to mess up. Like you got to mess up. You got to learn from your mistakes and stuff. And in my opinion, I think 3 months and again, this is all depending on where you're coming from, but like, if I knew how to draw pictures, okay, but I wanted to be able to do this stuff so that I can, make these amazing, big wall drawings or something like that, I'd want to spend more time than 3 months to try and, make mistakes and learn from them, and without the, I guess, the pressure of anything that you're trying to do in life. Like if you do this stuff because you're struggling with money, you're spending all your time learning this stuff, you're not going to, it's going to be a while for you to actually benefit, like making money and stuff, working with clients, figuring out how all that stuff goes, let alone trying to learn all the foundation below that at the same time. It's not going to work out. So, it's focus on like the steps needed to build all the stuff that you want to eventually get to, but don't try and skip a step if you haven't really gotten comfortable with it. If you want to learn something that's set up to do a to-do list that works with a back end and stuff, and you need that back end knowledge in order to make this happen, then, just learn enough about what you're wanting that to apply to, and not, try and skip over it, because then it'll just be another complex problem that you have to try and figure out on top of others, just go by it in steps, and don't try and rush. Just try and have fun.
Well, and I really like that idea, because now we're talking about, okay, I do want to build a to-do list. What does that require? And I want, it to get back in information. I want to be able to save this information. Now you have a reason to dive into the back end, and you're not just learning back end to learn back end. And I like the idea of not just learning front end to get a job, to learn front end. And that's why I highly influence people to figure out, like, what kind of problems do they want to solve? Even if you can't build it, like right now, today, what do you want to build? Like, what sounds fun to you? Like, when you like navigate different apps, like, what would be a really cool experience that would be similar to, an app that you really loved? Like, what do you want to build? What do you enjoy about this profession? But I think it's important to realize, like, we're talking about like only the 3-month mark, and I think it's important for people to realize, because I've had people come to me and they're frustrated because they haven't found a job and they just started coding 2 months ago. And I think it's important to set those realistic expectations. I always recommend, if you're doing it mostly full time on your own, not really a lot of guidance, you may be going through Udemy courses, you're going through Team Treehouse, you're going through YouTube video series, stuff like that. I recommend a year before you get into the industry. Do you feel like that's pretty unrealistic?
No, that's like right on the mark.
Yeah, it all depends on your life,
Yeah.
If you got kids and stuff, it might take a little bit longer, but until you get to that comfortable point,
Yeah.
I think it also, so much of it's like, time more than anything else, but like doing it every day. And it's not that you have to do it every day for 8 hours, because I don't think that's necessarily sustainable for most folks, but like doing it every day for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and doing it with like intentionality, not just flipping through, something absent-mindedly, but really like putting in time to like learn something and study it. And I also think being able to kind of like challenge yourself, I think about it like, working out or lifting weights. If you only lifted a 5-pound weight every day for a year, you're not going to be as strong as the guy who lifts 5 pounds, then 10, then 15, then 20. So figure out, what's your 10 pound, what's your 15, 20 pounds? How do you keep adding on that weight to your coding? But in the same way, if you pull out, the 100-pound dumbbell and you've never lifted weights, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be enjoyable. You're just going to end up hurt, discouraged, and you're going to walk away from it. You don't get any benefit from not moving the bar. So a lot of metaphors there getting mixed in, but hopefully.
I'm going to add a couple more. And then like, even to like your point of being able to move that 100-pound, 200-pound, even to like test yourself and to go back and like to a 10-pound and like tune up. Because like that's equally as important than like gaining those new skills, is like making sure that you understand the fundamentals that got you there. So it works both ways, yeah.
When do you think is the right time to pick up a framework?
We're going by like let's say, and you've got a really motivated person who is going to be career ready by month 12, at a year mark. I don't know. I would feel like you could do framework stuff at like month 9 or 10, like kind of that last portion. I find that the framework's nice in that it's like a good shortcut. I guess it depends on like how much it is, but it's all just built on these fundamentals. And if you don't know them, that to me was like a huge weakness for me, of like relying on the frameworks to cover up weaknesses in my own knowledge. And it was a huge problem, just not really understanding what the framework's doing or how it's doing it.
Yep.
And thinking that was going to be enough to get the job done.
You're also setting yourself up for a time limit. because everything changes as time goes by. And in 10 years from now, if you spent, an entire year learning React, and, let's just say that in 5 years from now, there's something else better or something else different or something like that. Sorry.
I mean, that's what they said with Angular.
I'm just saying. Yeah, I mean, it happens. Like things come around. You gotta learn how to juggle. Like just juggle, but just be comfortable with just kind of running through this stuff, because in the end, the stuff that's going to end up being there are going to be the fundamentals that he's talking about.
The Dreamweaver.
That is what ends up at the end. Yeah.
The Dreamweaver developers are shook right now from that comment.
So, I think it is really hard to set a timeline for when you should pick up a framework, but it sounds like we kind of all agree fundamentals are incredibly important. Probably a lot of aspiring developers skip over too many of them, and then when they dive into a framework, sometimes you're learning the practical knowledge of that framework, but kind of to back everyone up, and a lot of people that kind of know how to put up a React project until it breaks, and then we start debugging, and then we start even dealing with problems of using a class and how to use it, and all of a sudden they don't know what a class is, and it just kind of snowballs from there. But I know a lot of people that dive into frameworks because they're just trying to become more marketable, and they don't really know the fundamentals well. And
you could do that, yeah.
It's
you could. You don't want it though.
You don't want to what?
You don't want to just do that stuff just because you want to be more marketable. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry,
and so this is why I actually recommend Vue for a lot of people, John. And I've changed my perspective on it maybe about a year and a half ago. But I like the idea. What do you think about learning a framework once you've started to build more complex applications without it and realized how messy it can be? How messy it can be managing all that dynamic data?
Getting that perspective is great. It kind of allows you to think freely about other solutions you might have in the future. I mean, these are just utilities out of your utility belt, as you build on your own stuff through time, so learning this stuff is very helpful. If there's problems that, something, solves, it's beneficial to learn, a library. Most of the time, these libraries, they're good when you are kind of towards the end and you have these sort of fundamentals in your tool set already, and you kind of just get that understanding. But I mean, these libraries, there's Matter.js is a physics library. I am not going to learn physics if I want to make some game or something like that. So of course, why not learn it? I'm not going to try and build some physics library without the knowledge of or using Matter.js to do shortcuts. I guess it's just the context of how you use it, or the application, I should say.
I think when building an application using a framework, once they've gotten to that point, it should always be based off of something that they've built previously. Because I think with a lot of these frameworks, they give you examples, but because wherever varying steps they're coming from or experience, it's kind of overwhelming. But once you have that core, that base, you can then convert your static HTML, CSS, JavaScript application into a React to-do list or React top favorites, whatever, knowing how it's supposed to work. To add to your point about debugging, it's okay, I know how it's supposed to work, just statically. And how does that translate to the framework? And then why is it breaking within the framework? So then you not only gain debugging skills, but you also gain the practical knowledge of how the framework works, without being too oh my God, I've stepped into this, what is happening? Because I've definitely done that. I've had to learn 2 frameworks on the job. It was definitely that
man.
With Angular. It's oh my God, this is interesting. And then I had the practical knowledge of how Angular worked, and then I tried to apply it to how React worked. It's they fundamentally just don't work the same. So I'm just have to start from zero and trying to build up my knowledge. So it's always nice to have a starting point.
I like that, and I think I've probably given bad advice to a few people where I would go back and change the advice I gave them, where they wanted to rebuild their portfolio in React. They wanted to rebuild a personal project that they worked on in React at a framework. And, I think I kind of forgot that how overwhelmed you can feel when you learn a framework. And I think I underestimated that because I went through a coding boot camp and I was very overwhelmed with it, with instructors next to me, with students that were learning the same thing. And I think it's really helpful to be able to rebuild a single project because you pretty much answered 95% of the questions. Now you're just translating it into something more organized and you don't have to worry about all that extra stuff. I like that idea. I really do. So when would you say people should start applying for positions, front-end positions?
Interviewing for front-end is always like a tossed bag because of like the state of interviewing. Because like we've all been talking about like practicality and like UI and like frameworks, and like that's great. But like some of these companies are like interviewing for algorithms and data structures, and it's like there's that whole bag of like needing to know that just to get your foot in the door, which is really unfortunate because once you're in the door, you don't really use them, or at least in my experience, you don't really use them. But like, I'd say familiarize yourself with the idea of like those things that companies are looking for, like recursion and like, God forbid, binary search trees. But yeah, there would have to be some sort of factor in that game plan for like accounting for that. So I'd say like once you're really set on those basics, which could take a year, let's say like being optimistic, it takes a year. I'd say like year and a month, or even like sprinkling in some sort of knowledge to get yourself aware of it. Like at that point where you're translating your knowledge from static to a framework is when you should be learning those data structures, and then like interviewing for jobs, maybe a year, 2 months to a year and a half, maybe. But like definitely after you've given yourself some time to kind of like go through the things over and over to where you feel comfortable, because in it, like you could have a whole separate talk on like interviewing and the stress that causes. So a year,
Okay.
year and a half. Yeah.
I would add though, if you're feeling ready and you've spent some time, you're never going to be like a front end expert, especially, I don't think anybody is, but if you're teaching yourself, you're going to have some gaps in your knowledge. And I really think like if you're wanting a job and you're able to build some stuff and maybe the people around you are saying this looks really good, or you're showing it to people and they're like, this is nice. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting out there, putting in some applications. I think the worst thing that can happen is they'll say no, which they will say no. And there's a lot of no's.
Get ready for that.
Or you just won't hear anything forever. And that's okay. And that's just part of it. And, I think waiting until, I think one of the things though that can happen is like you just keep waiting until you're ready, and it's kind of that imposter syndrome kicks in and you're like, well, am I ready?
Yeah.
Do I really know this? And then you start to fall back. And I don't know, I'm picturing someone who, let's say, like grinds out a year of, really hard work, hits the end and is still like, I don't know, I'm not ready. And that motivation and that engagement starts to fall off. If you're not using these skills pretty regularly, they do decay. And, if you say, well, I've worked really hard for a year, I'm going to take a month off, then apply for jobs, I think that's a bad idea. You just need to,
Yeah.
you got to just take that momentum and go into it. And I also think it's, interviews are frustrating and can be, really expose your weaknesses and not make you feel so great. And it also gives you an opportunity to see like, well, what do I really need to do to get a job? One of the very first interviews I went on, I did so poorly. It was embarrassing beyond belief. I couldn't even, the people in the meeting were like on their phones by the end of it because I couldn't figure something out. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to work anywhere. So it's like things like that where it's like, you're such a failure, and that's okay. And, you move forwards and think about what didn't work and patch those holes up and keep moving. But I don't know.
There's
You're
a way,
pretty optimistic.
Yeah. What I've done, this is how it worked in my life. I started doing the programming stuff because it's fun, kept doing it, learned more about it, was able to make things because I learned more about it, was able to make bigger things because I can make these smaller things. And then other people started seeing it. Other people were like, hey, I like that. could you do something for me? And then you start juggling and doing this whole kind of entrepreneurship type thing where you're making things for people and you're kind of just getting your feet wet. And then when that's happening, you're probably charging them cheap, probably, making some bad decisions here and there, but it's a test. It's just getting yourself a little exposed to it, right? When you get comfortable with this and you're able to, make you're kind of doing it on your own. You don't have the pressure of having to do interviews and stuff to see if some other guy that's bigger and better are going to say, well, yes or no. You're getting used to this. And when you do that and you go to do the interview, that you'll have that comfort zone. I remember for me, at least, being able to do this and have clients that I could actually, as a matter of fact, those clients were the people that I put down as referrals, because those were the only people in the entire world that knew that I could do this stuff, was the clients that I found on my way of trying to get, better and stuff, so just doing that and just trying that out first, for me, it helped immensely. Getting my foot in the door and doing my first interview and stuff like that. Like, of course I was nervous. It was still a first time, but I have all this experience of failing and stuff and just kind of, you know what I mean?
Well, not
a
even
lot of the
failing
times
too. It's like validating.
Right. And when you get into a company, I mean, those are the things that are going to end up happening. Like you were saying with the frameworks and stuff, or, just these things that they're asking about probably don't really apply. But these things that, you're actually being able to get experience in everyday life, and how clients, how they talk to you and stuff. I mean, that's going to be like a kind of real life scenario. So going into a job, you'll have that you'll be able to hit the ground running. More so.
I like that. I definitely like that. So I think two important things to note. Interviews are going to be very intimidating. And
if you let them.
That's the thing. If you let them. I think in the beginning, I stopped recommending people to go in. Well, I stopped recommending people to try not to be intimidated by the interviews. And I kind of just let them. And one thing I like to do is talk through how their experience was. And let's talk about it, how they feel about it. And try to put that into just, get emotions out and kind of try to put that into more of a rational perspective of of course, this is your perspective. You probably felt intimidated. You probably felt like they were judging you and that you're not going to make it as a developer and anything else that comes out. But I think it's really healthy just to kind of push yourself out there to just experience it over and over and get a little bit, get a little bit of a thick skin and teach them that what they have been doing for the past year has a lot of value. And just because someone that you picture as better than you and more experienced than you, and everything that they say, it has to all be true. I think it's important to share kind of just a realistic perspective with them. And I think that happens with them exposing themselves over and over and over, and realizing some interviews are just going to be crappy. Some are not. Some people are kind, some are not. And I think that's why I like pushing for the interview as soon as possible, just so they can get that exposure. And I think it also teaches you what your gaps are, because it taught me my gaps. And I wish I would have went to interviews much, much sooner. I would have gave up PHP a long time ago, went more with JavaScript, just with what I loved. But you also have to be careful. I think an important thing to dealing with the no and all the rejection, I talk about exposing yourself a lot, but a lot of it's just eating healthy, sleeping well, exercising, having a really good diet, meditating if you enjoy meditation, yoga, anything to calm yourself down and become more mindful of you and your situation and not have such an emotional attachment over your thoughts. It's I think a lot of people get through that process in a very healthy way when they have a very healthy lifestyle outside of the industry. Because I don't think I made a post about this, I think, but I don't think imposter syndrome is solved within the industry. I think it's solved internally. It's if you have imposter syndrome as a developer, you probably have imposter syndrome with other things. You probably have insecurities you probably haven't dealt with. And maybe a lot of that confidence does come from other areas. I don't know. Maybe I'm just ranting. Maybe it's just a tangent that doesn't matter.
It's to your point, that's why I was saying, once you get those once you have an internal check of like, okay, I'm good on this, because like those interview processes can like be demoralizing, and like it can almost like set you back or not even want, or set you back and have you not even want to interview. Because I've definitely been at a point where it's like I've been interviewing, I get no after no after no. It's like, you know what, let me just take a step back, like not quit, but like I know I'm good enough with these skills, and that's kind of like the confidence that with any like new person coming into this that you want them to have going into interviewing, knowing that they're going to get no's. Because you don't want to get into that first interview thinking, oh, I'm great, and then they get that first no, that second no, that third no, and then it's like, why am I even doing this? Like, and then they give up. Like that'd be the worst, to get like so far because of your experiences at interviewing. It like knocks you back to the point of like, no, I'm done. I've just wasted a year of my life, and like that's not what we want. So it's like that internal confidence that is like once you have a grasp of that, I think then it's time to kind of go out and interview.
And I completely agree with that. And 90% of people that come to my meetup are those types of people. They've spent about a year and they give up. And it's a huge chunk. You wouldn't expect it to be that high. But I follow up with a lot of people and kind of just random sampling. And 90% of the people that come to my meetup, they're struggling with something. We'll get them through a little bit further as far as we can. But a lot of people give up. So many people just give up. It's a hard thing to get into. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one like other just thought on that, it's that confidence that you can like be a front end developer is like so huge. And that's going to help you from like the day one of like your first, HTML page you make to like you're struggling in interviews, you're doing, struggling at your job, the belief that like I can do this or people do this and I can do it too, can really go a really long way.
It can. I think like my final piece of advice is I wish I would have had a mentor. I wish I would have had a good mentor, and you can find that in tons of online communities and meetups. And but I've found the mentor that's helped given me confidence that I could be a developer when I thought, because I almost gave up several times. Like I came very close to going. I lived in Northwest Indiana when I was learning how to code, and I almost went to the mills, gave up like a year and a half to almost 2 years of what I just did. I completely almost threw it away. And I think what helped me not do that and finally start gaining confidence that late into the game was I met developers. I finally met developers, but developers that had humility, that shared their stories of how they felt like they weren't intelligent enough. They felt like they didn't have what it took to become a software engineer. And I love working with developers with humility. I love meeting developers with humility. All of my mentors have tons of humility, and they're willing to be vulnerable and share that with you. Because I think it's important to realize that successful software engineers, just like if you could count the number of failures before they finally got to that point, I think it would give people a peace of mind that they're human, you're human. There's no reason that you can't do what they just did as long as you put the time in and continue to be consistent and grow and gain confidence in yourself. All right. I think that's pretty good. I love that we kind of came up with a plan. I really had no plan of coming up with a plan, but I love what we came up with. And I did try to like timetable it a little bit and say within a month, within 3 months. And I think that's a really hard thing to do because everyone grows differently. Hopefully this kind of general vague outline, help people. But what I really think we tackled was a lot of the issues people face, a lot of the insecurities people face, and the lack of confidence that pretty much all of us have faced at some point. And sometimes I think it's just helpful for developers to hear that. But yeah, I think we're ready for our outros. I want to definitely try not to go over. We have a few minutes. John, feel free to advertise your Twitch channel, but if people wanted to reach out to you, how could they do that?
If people want to reach out to me, so I mean, I try and go on Twitch as much as I can, but as of late, it's been very rare for me to go out there. I would say on Twitter, you can catch me at The Good Idea Co. I don't have a public facing website yet, but I will. Let's see what else. Code Sandbox. I usually go and hang out there. I've got a little profile of some things that I've made there. Otherwise, the rest of my content is kind of on my Twitch account, which is Good Idea Co. as well. So
awesome.
Hopefully in the future, man, we'll keep the fingers crossed with these kids of mine.
Yeah, well, I just want to see you get some rest, if I'm being honest with you, because you're at it all the time.
Yeah, I know, but it's, I don't let it get the best of me.
Yeah,
I go for a ride or something. Got to balance.
Absolutely. All right, how about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I don't have too much in terms of social media stuff, but if folks want to connect, they can reach me just on LinkedIn under my name, Brandon Gorson. I'm always up to talk about, if you want to talk about therapy, or if you want to talk about coding and developing and what it takes to get started, definitely feel free to reach out.
I love how all of us just kind of pretended this green screen thing didn't exist the entire podcast.
I was just going to say, is there some aliens outside his house or something?
How about you?
What's going on here?
So reach on LinkedIn, Evan Vaughn. I'd say Instagram, but I just deactivated that for mental health reasons. I gave myself the end of the year, just to disconnect. I've recently started on Twitter, Elvano. It's a college nickname that I had. So feel free to reach out any of those channels.
All right, cool. Well, feel free to stick on just a couple extra minutes once we end this. But for everyone that's watching, definitely subscribe. It helps me out. We are very close to being partnered on YouTube. So thank you for all the comments. It helps the algorithm. Thank you for all the likes. That helps as well. And of course, watch time, everything has been, my channel has grown exponentially because of all of you. So thank you so much for that, seriously. And John, Brandon, Evan, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having this chat with you. I think it kind of turned more into a front-end developer, kind of just front-end developers talking shop and giving some advice. And I think it turned out really well. So thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.